The year was 2847, and humanity had finally reached the stars. After 300 years of slow expansion, humans had built colonies on 40 different worlds. They had created massive space stations, built powerful ships, and learned to survive in the cold darkness of space. But they were still alone. They had never met another intelligent species, and many believed they never would. That changed on a warm summer day, when a massive alien ship appeared above. Earth, the ship was unlike anything humans had ever seen. It was silver and gold, covered in strange symbols, and large enough to block out the sun. People across the planet looked up in fear and wonder as the vessel hung silently in the sky. The aliens called themselves the Zorath, where they came with an offer of friendship. Their empire stretched across 1,000 star systems, and they claimed to rule over 200 different species. They told humanity that they had been watching them for centuries, impressed by their rapid progress and technological growth. Now they wanted to welcome humans into the galactic community. President Daniel Morrison was a careful man. He had spent 30 years in politics, and he knew that nothing came without a price. But the opportunity was too great to ignore. Trade with the Zorath could bring technologies that would take humanity centuries to develop on their own. Alliance with their empire could protect Earth from unknown threats lurking in the darkness between stars. After months of careful negotiation, the Zorath invited humanity to send a delegation to Kelvara Prime, a neutral space station where the final peace treaty would be signed. They requested that Earth send their highest military leaders as a sign of trust and good faith. Admiral Catherine Wright was chosen to lead the delegation. She was 62 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen countless battles. She had commanded the Earth's defense fleet for 15 years and was respected by every soldier who served under her. When she received the order to lead the diplomatic mission, she accepted without hesitation. 6 other generals were selected to accompany her. Each was a woman of remarkable achievement, chosen not just for their rank but for what they represented about humanity's progress. General Maria Santos was 58 and had commanded ground forces for 20 years. She had led soldiers through 3 colonial wars and had never lost a campaign. Her troops called her the Iron Mother because she was tough but fair, demanding excellence while caring deeply for every life under her command. She had 2 daughters back on Earth and had promised them she would return with stories of alien worlds. General Patricia Lane was the oldest of the group at 6. She ran Strategic Intelligence, the division responsible for protecting Earth from external threats. She had spent 4 decades gathering information, analyzing dangers, and preventing disasters before they could happen. Her mind was sharp as a blade, and nothing escaped her notice. She had agreed to join the mission because she wanted to understand the Zorath better. General Diana Cruz commanded the Aerospace Division and had personally designed the defense grid that protected Earth's solar system. She was 54, brilliant with numbers, and passionate about flight. As a young woman, she had dreamed of touching the stars. Now she was going to meet the beings who lived among them. General Nicole Perry led the medical corps. She was 51 and had spent her career saving lives. During the Martian plague that killed millions, she had worked without sleep for weeks, developing treatments and organizing relief efforts. Her gentle nature hid a core of steel. She believed that this mission could bring medical knowledge that would benefit all of humanity. General Laura Bennett headed the engineering division. At 49, she was the youngest of the group but no less accomplished. She had overseen the construction of humanity's largest ships and had solved problems that others thought impossible. She was excited about the mission because she wanted to study alien technology and learn their secrets. General Susan Kelly commanded the reserve forces. She was 60 and had spent her career training soldiers. 3 generations of Earth's military had learned from her methods. She was patient and wise, with a talent for seeing potential in people that others overlooked. She joined the mission because she believed in its importance for humanity's future. These 7 women gathered on Earth for the final time before departure. They met in a conference room in Geneva, surrounded by flags from every nation on Earth. President Morrison addressed them personally, thanking them for their service and their sacrifice. Admiral Wright spoke on behalf of the group. Her voice was calm and steady, filled with quiet confidence that had inspired millions throughout her career. "We go not as conquerors or beggars," she said. "We go as representatives of humanity, carrying with us the hopes of every person on Earth and every colony in our space. We will conduct ourselves with honor, negotiate with wisdom, and return with a treaty that secures our future among the stars." The diplomatic vessel Horizon's Edge launched 3 days later. It was the finest ship humanity had ever built, sleek and powerful, designed to impress any species that saw it. The journey to Kelvara Prime took 2 weeks, during which the generals prepared for the negotiations ahead. Admiral Wright spent hours studying Zorath culture, trying to understand their values and customs. General Laun analyzed intelligence reports, looking for any sign of deception or hidden motives. General Cruz examined the navigation data, fascinated by the alien technology that allowed faster-than-light travel. The others prepared in their own ways, contributing their expertise to the mission. When Kelvara Prime finally came into view, even these experienced officers were struck by its magnificence. The station was enormous, a spinning wheel of metal and light that seemed to glow against the darkness of space. Ships from dozens of species docked at its ports, carrying traders, diplomats, hosts, and travelers from across the galaxy. The Zorath greeting party met them at the docking bay. The aliens were tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. They moved with fluid grace and spoke in voices that sounded like music. Their leader, a diplomat named Voroth, welcomed the humans with elaborate ceremony. "Earth's daughters honor us with their presence," Voroth said, bowing deeply. "The Zorath Empire welcomes you to Kelvara Prime. Your quarters have been prepared, and the negotiations will begin in 3 days. Until then, please enjoy our hospitality." The generals were escorted to luxurious rooms in the finest section of the station. They were given food, entertainment, and anything else they requested. Servants attended to their every need, and guards stood watch outside their doors for their protection. Admiral Wright accepted the hospitality, but remained cautious. Something felt wrong, though she could not explain what. She shared her concerns with General Laun during a private conversation. "They are too eager," Wright said. "Too accommodating. In my experience, when someone offers everything for nothing, they usually want something you are not willing to give." General Laun agreed, but had found no evidence of treachery. All her intelligence suggested that the Zorath genuinely wanted peace with humanity. Perhaps Wright's instincts were wrong this time. They were not wrong. On the second night, Admiral Wright woke to the sound of plasma fire echoing through the corridors. The smell of burning metal filled the air, and screams pierced the darkness. She grabbed her sidearm and rushed to the door, her heart pounding with the certainty that everything had gone terribly wrong. The peaceful mission had become a nightmare, and humanity's future was about to change forever. Admiral Catherine Wright opened her door and stepped into chaos. The corridor was filled with smoke and the flash of weapons fire. Zorath soldiers in black armor moved through the hallway, their plasma rifles cutting through anything in their path. This was not a random attack. This was an organized military operation. She raised her sidearm and fired at the nearest soldier, dropping him with a shot to the chest. 2 more turned toward her, but she was already moving, using the doorway as cover while she returned fire. Decades of combat experience guided her hands as she fought to survive through the smoke. As she saw General Maria Santos lying motionless on the floor. The Iron Mother had been struck down before she could even reach her weapon. Her eyes stared at nothing, and a pool of dark blood spread beneath her body. Wright felt her heart break, but she could not stop to mourn. Not yet. She pushed forward, fighting her way down the corridor. Another Zorath soldier appeared, and she killed him with 2 quick shots. The station's alarm systems were silent, which meant this attack had been planned from the inside. Someone had disabled the warnings. Someone had betrayed them. General Patricia Laun had managed to fight back. Wright found her body near the intelligence office, surrounded by the corpses of 3 Zorath soldiers. Even in death, Lane's hand still gripped her weapon. She had gone down fighting, taking enemies with her until the very end. Wright said a silent prayer and kept moving. General Diana Cruz had tried to reach the communication center, Wright found her halfway there, shot in the back while running. The aerospace commander who had dreamed of touching the stars had died running through a foreign station, murdered by those who had promised friendship. The sounds of fighting were fading now. Either the other generals had escaped, or they were already dead. Wright feared the worst, but held on to hope as she continued toward the communication hub. If she could send a message to Earth, the deaths of her friends would not be meaningless. She found General Nicole Perry outside the medical bay. The healer had been trying to help a wounded colleague when the soldiers found her. Her medical kit lay scattered across the floor, its contents stained with blood. Perry had spent her life saving others, and in the end, she had died trying to do the same. Wright was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she fought through the station. She found General Laura Bennett near the engineering section, her body still warm. The brilliant engineer had been shot multiple times, probably because she had tried to sabotage the station's systems. Even facing death, Bennett had tried to fight back in her own way. General Susan Kelly was the last. Wright found her standing guard outside the communication center, her body riddled with wounds but still upright. She had bought time for something. Wright did not know what until she saw the flashing light on the communication console inside. A message had been sent. Kelly had held the door long enough for someone to transmit a signal to Earth. Her sacrifice had not. It's been in vain, but the message was incomplete. Wright rushed to the console and began recording, her voice steady despite the horror around her. This is Admiral Catherine Wright of the United Earth Coalition. We have been betrayed. The Zorath have killed us. General Santos, General Lane, General Cruz, General Perry, General Bennett, General Kelly, all dead. Murdered while we slept. This was no accident. This was planned assassination. She heard footsteps behind her. More soldiers were coming. Tell our families we died with honor, she continued, speaking faster now. Tell Earth what happened here. Tell humanity to remember us. And tell everyone, never forgive. Never forget. Make them pay for what they have done. The door burst open. Wright turned and fired, taking down 2 soldiers before a plasma bolt struck her shoulder. She fell against the console, but kept talking. It came in peace. They answered with murder. Let history remember who we were and what they did to us. Another shot hit her chest. She slumped forward, her blood spreading across the console. Her final breath was a whisper that the microphone barely caught. Avenge us. The transmission ended. On Earth, President Daniel Morrison received the message at 3 a.m. His aide woke him with trembling hands, unable to speak the words. Morrison watched the recording in his bedroom, still wearing his nightclothes. He watched it again in his office. Then again, in the Situation Room, surrounded by his advisors. By the 5th viewing, his shock had turned to cold fury. By the 7th, he had made his decision. The Zoroth Empire released a statement 6 hours later. They claimed that the 7 human generals had attempted to assassinate Emperor Vorthok during a secret meeting. They had been discovered and executed as criminals. The Zoroth provided evidence. Recordings and documents that showed the generals planning their attack. The evidence was obviously fake. The recordings showed wrong dates. The documents contained errors that any analyst could spot. The Zoroth had not even tried to make their lies believable. They thought humanity would simply accept the insult and move on. They were wrong. President Morrison called an emergency session of the Global Defense Council. Representatives from every nation on Earth gathered in Geneva. Watching the transmission from Admiral Wright and listening to the Zoroth lies, when Morrison asked for a vote on declaring war, the decision was unanimous. But Morrison wanted more than just a declaration. He wanted humanity united in a way it had never been before. He addressed the entire planet in a broadcast that reached every colony, every station, and every ship in human space. His words were simple, spoken without notes or prepared speeches. He stood alone in front of the camera, his face showing the grief and anger that every human felt. Yesterday, we lost 7 of our finest daughters. Admiral Catherine Wright, General Maria Santos, General Patricia Lane, General Diana Cruz, General Nicole Perry, General Laura Bennett, General Susan Kelly. They went to Kelvara Prime, seeking peace. They were murdered in cold blood by those who invited them. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. The Zoroth claim our generals were criminals. They lie. They claim they acted in self-defense. They lie. They have not returned the bodies of our fallen. They have offered no apology, no explanation, nothing but contempt for human life and human grief. His voice hardened. They believe we are weak because we sought peace. They believe we are soft because we value diplomacy. They believe that killing our leaders will break our spirit and make us submit to their empire. He leaned forward, his eyes burning with determination. They do not know humanity. They do not know our history. They do not know what we have survived, what we have overcome, what we are capable of when pushed too far. They are about to learn. Morrison straightened his shoulders and spoke his final words. To the Zoroth Empire, I say this. You have awakened something you do not understand. You have united humanity in a way that nothing else could. You have made enemies of a species that never forgets and never forgives. We are coming for you. Not for conquest. Not for territory. For justice. And nothing in this galaxy will stop us until we have it. The broadcast ended, but its effects spread like fire through dry grass. Recruitment centers were flooded with volunteers. Factories switched to military production within days. Scientists abandoned peaceful research to develop weapons that would tear through Zoroth defenses. Humanity had been peaceful, hopeful, eager to join the galactic community. That humanity was dead now, killed alongside 7 brave women on Kelvara Prime. What rose in its place was something the galaxy had never seen before. Something the Zoroth would learn to fear. Something that would not rest until every last debt was paid. The war for vengeance had begun. The transformation of human civilization happened faster than anyone thought possible. Within 1 week of President Morrison's broadcast, every factory on Earth and its colonies had switched to war production. Civilian vehicles were melted down for metal. Consumer goods were forgotten. Every resource humanity possessed was directed toward a single purpose: building the largest military force in human history. Admiral Christopher Grant was placed in command of the newly formed Vengeance Fleet. He was 55 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, with a face that looked like it was carved from stone. He had served under Admiral Wright for 15 years, and her death had broken something inside him. What remained was cold, focused, and absolutely determined. Grant stood on the bridge of the flagship Catherine Wright, named in honor of his fallen mentor. The battleship was the largest vessel that humanity had ever built. Bristling with weapons and protected by shields that could withstand nuclear strikes, around it gathered the ships of the Vengeance Fleet. 3,000 warships ready for battle. The fleet had been assembled in just 6 months, a feat that should have taken years. Human engineers worked without sleep. Human workers built ships around the clock. Human scientists invented new weapons and defenses in weeks instead of decades. The entire species was united by a single burning purpose. Lieutenant Commander Amanda Price commanded the destroyer Swift Justice. She was 32 years old, with red hair and freckles across her nose. Before the massacre, she had planned to retire after her tour ended. She had wanted to start a family, settle down on a quiet colony world, and live a peaceful life. Those plans died with the 7 generals. Price recorded a message for her parents before the fleet departed. She sat in her quarters, the camera capturing her tired eyes and determined expression. "Mom, Dad, I know you wanted me to come home. I was going to. I had a whole life planned out, far away from war and fighting. But then they killed our generals. They murdered 7 women who spent their lives protecting us, and they laughed about it afterward." She paused, gathering her thoughts. I cannot let that stand. None of us can. Admiral Wright's last words were asking us to avenge her. General Kelly died holding a door so that message could reach us. How can I go home and live a quiet life knowing that their sacrifice meant nothing? Price shook her head. So I am staying. I am fighting. I will come home when justice is done, or I will die trying to achieve it. Either way, I will make you proud. I love you both. Please understand why I have to do this." The message ended, but it was not unique. Millions of similar messages were sent across human space as soldiers prepared for war. Parents wrote to children. Lovers wrote to each other. Friends said goodbye. Everyone knew that many would not return, but they went anyway. Admiral Grant addressed the fleet before departure. His voice was broadcast to every ship, heard by 2 million soldiers and crew members. He stood on the bridge of the Catherine Wright, his uniform crisp and his bearing military straight. "Warriors of Earth," he began, "today we begin a journey that our ancestors could never have imagined. We travel not to explore or to trade, but to deliver justice for those who were taken from us. 7 generals died on Kelvara Prime. Their blood calls out for vengeance, and we will answer." He paused, his eyes scanning the stars visible through the viewport. "The Zorith believe they know war. They have conquered 200 species. They have ruled their empire for 10,000 years. They think humanity is just another primitive race to be conquered or destroyed." His voice hardened. "They are wrong. They do not know human history. They do not know about the wars we have fought among ourselves, the enemies we have defeated, the impossible odds we have overcome. They do not know that humanity has never, in all our existence, surrendered to an enemy who sought our destruction." Grant's hand curled into a fist. "We will teach them. We will show them what happens when you harm those we love. We will burn their fleets, capture their worlds, and bring their empire to its knees. And when they beg for mercy, when they plead for peace, we will remind them that they offered no mercy to our sisters on Kelvara Prime." He straightened to his full height. 7 generals gave their lives for humanity. Now we will honor their sacrifice with victory. Move out. Show no fear. Take no prisoners who resist. And remember always why we fight. The fleet jumped to faster than light speed, vanishing from human space in a flash of light. The journey to Kelvara Prime took 3 weeks. During that time, the soldiers trained and prepared. They studied Zoroth tactics, learned their weaknesses, and practiced battle formations. Officers held strategy sessions that lasted through the night. Everyone wanted to be ready when the moment came. Captain Gregory Adams commanded the carrier Patricia Lane. He was 41, balding and known throughout the fleet for his brilliant tactical mind. During the journey, he developed new fighter tactics that would become famous in the battles ahead. The Zoroth fight in formal lines, Adams explained to his pilots. They expect their enemies to face them directly, ship against ship, in honorable combat. We will not give them that honor. We will attack from all angles. We will retreat and return. We will use every dirty trick in the book, because our goal is not to fight fairly. Our goal is to win." His pilots listened carefully. They were young, most of them under 30, but their eyes held the same determination as the veterans. They had grown up hearing stories about the 7 generals. Now they would fight to avenge them. The Zorith knew humanity was coming. Their spies had reported the massive fleet departing Earth space. Emperor Vorthok himself had dismissed the threat, calling humans primitive barbarians who would be easily crushed. "They have never fought a real war," Vorthok told his advisors. "They have only battled among themselves. Our ships are more advanced, our soldiers better trained, our empire more powerful than anything they can imagine. Let them come. We will destroy them and add their worlds to our territory." His advisors agreed, as they always did. They had ruled the galaxy for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to face a truly determined enemy. They had conquered peaceful species who surrendered after a few battles. They had never faced a species that fought to the last. Soldier, they were about to learn, the vengeance. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light speed at the edge of the Kelvara system. 3,000 human warships faced a Zorath defense force of 2,000 vessels. By any military calculation, the Zorith should have had the advantage. Their ships were more advanced, their weapons more powerful, their experience vastly greater. But military calculations do not account for fury. They do not account for grief. They do not account for a species united by a single burning desire for justice. "Admiral," Grant looked at the Zorith fleet arrayed before him. He thought about Admiral Wright, about the message she had sent with her dying breath. He thought about General Santos, shot down before she could fight back. He thought about General Laun, surrounded by enemies she had killed before they killed her. He thought about all of them. The 7 women who had trusted in peace and found only betrayal. His voice was calm when he gave the order that would change. Galactic history. All ships. Attack. No mercy, no retreat. For the 7. The Battle of Kelvara Prime had begun. The Battle of Kelvara Prime lasted 11 hours, and it changed everything the galaxy knew about warfare. The Zorath commanders expected humans to fight in traditional formation, lining up their ships for direct combat as all civilized species did. Instead, the Vengeance fleet attacked like a swarm of angry wasps. Admiral Grant divided his forces into 30 separate groups, each attacking from a different angle. Human ships would strike hard, withdraw before the Zorath could respond, then attack again from another direction. The alien commanders were confused. Their training had not prepared them for enemies who refused to stand and fight. The destroyer Swift Justice, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Amanda Price, led one of the most devastating attacks. Price had studied the Zorath formation and noticed a weakness. Their supply ships were poorly protected, clustered at the rear where they thought no enemy could reach them. All weapons target those cargo vessels, Price ordered. Take out their supplies, and they cannot repair or refuel. Her destroyer and 4 others slipped past the main battle, using asteroids as cover. They emerged behind the Zorath lines and opened fire. 7 supply ships exploded before the enemy even realized what was happening. By the time Zorath warships turned to intercept, Price's group was already retreating to rejoin the main fleet. Captain Gregory Adams launched his fighter squadrons from the carrier Patricia Lane. His pilots had trained for weeks on his new tactics, and now they put that training to use. Instead of engaging in dogfights, they targeted specific systems on Zorath warships: communication arrays, sensor pods, engine exhausts. They crippled enemy ships without destroying them, leaving damaged vessels to clutter the battlefield and confuse enemy formations. The Zorath flagship Eternal Glory tried to rally the defense. Its commander, Admiral Zorath Kelvax, was a veteran of 50 campaigns and had never lost a battle. He ordered his ships to tighten formation and concentrate fire on the human battleships. But Admiral Grant had anticipated this response. As the Zorath grouped together, human ships released thousands of mines into their path. The explosions tore through closely packed vessels, destroying or damaging dozens in seconds. Kelvax watched in horror as his careful formation became a killing ground. The battleship. Catherine Wright led the final assault. Admiral Grant stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the enemy flagship. Around him, officers reported damage, casualties, and ammunition levels. The battle had cost humanity dearly. Nearly 200 ships had been destroyed, and thousands of soldiers were dead. But the Zorath had suffered worse. Much worse. A Zoroth dreadnought, the Conqueror's Pride, broke through the human lines and headed straight for the Catherine Wright. It was the largest enemy vessel on the field, bristling with weapons that could destroy smaller ships with a single volley. Its commander broadcast a message demanding human surrender. "You have fought well, primitives," the voice said. "But this battle is over. Surrender now, and some of you may survive to serve the Empire." Grant did not bother to respond. Instead, he gave an order that shocked even his own crew. Ramming speed. All hands, brace for impact. The Catherine Wright surged forward, its engines at maximum power. The Conqueror's Pride fired everything it had, but the human battleship kept coming. Its shields failed. Its armor buckled. Fire erupted across its hull. But it did not stop. The 2 ships collided with a force that sent shockwaves across the battlefield. The explosion was visible from Kelvara Prime itself, a brief new star that outshone everything around it. Both vessels were destroyed, along with Admiral Grant and everyone aboard. But the Zorath fleet broke. The destruction of their mightiest dreadnought, rammed by an enemy they had dismissed as barbarians, shattered their confidence. Ships began retreating toward the station, then past it, fleeing toward the Imperial core worlds. By the time the battle ended, less than 40% of the Zoruth Defense Force remained. Vice Admiral Rachel Morton assumed command of the Vengeance fleet. She was 60 years old, stern and capable, and she had served with Grant for 20 years. Standing on the bridge of the cruiser Diana Cruz, she surveyed the wreckage of the battlefield and the station that hung among it. "All ships, secure Calvara Prime," she ordered. "Find the bodies of our generals. We are bringing them home." The search took 3 days. Zoroth records showed where the bodies had been disposed of, treated as garbage and thrown into the station's recycling systems. Nothing remained except fragments that could be identified through genetic testing. Human soldiers collected every piece they could find, treating each fragment with the reverence it deserved. The war did not end with Calvara Prime. It had barely begun. Over the following 18 months, human forces pushed deeper into Zoroth territory than any enemy had reached in 5,000 years. Every world that had supported the massacre was targeted. Every military installation was destroyed. Every ship that refused to surrender was eliminated. Lieutenant. Commander Price earned promotion after promotion as her tactical skills became legendary. At the Battle of Vorth's Gate, she led a squadron of destroyers against a force 3 times their size and emerged victorious. At the Siege of Kental Station, she developed the communication jamming techniques that would cripple Zoroth's coordination throughout the war. Now Rear Admiral Adams commanded the carrier group that broke through Zoroth's defenses at their inner worlds. His fighter tactics were studied and copied across the fleet. Pilots competed for the honor of serving under him, knowing that his leadership meant victory. But the greatest battle was yet to come. Zoroth Prime, the homeworld of the Empire, was defended by the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. 2,000 warships surrounded the planet, supported by orbital defense platforms and ground-based weapons. Emperor Vorthok gathered every remaining asset of his empire for this final stand. The human fleet that arrived was smaller than the force that had attacked Calvara Prime. The war had cost them dearly. But the ships that remained were crewed by veterans, commanded by officers who had learned from every battle, and driven by a purpose that 18 months of fighting had only strengthened. Admiral Morton addressed the fleet before the final battle. "We have fought across 100 systems. We have lost friends, family, and thousands of good soldiers. But we have never forgotten why we fight. Today we end this war. Today we bring justice to those who murdered our sisters. Today we show the galaxy what humanity is truly capable of." The Battle of Zoroth Prime lasted 7 days. It was the bloodiest, most brutal conflict in human history. Ships fought until their weapons ran dry, then rammed enemy vessels. Soldiers boarded enemy craft and fought hand to hand. Neither side asked for quarter, and neither side offered it. On the 7th day, the last Zoroth defense platform fell silent. The orbital shipyards burned. The proud fleet that had defended the Empire lay in ruins, scattered across the system like broken toys. Emperor Vorthok tried to flee. He commandeered a civilian transport, disguised himself as a refugee, and headed for the outer system. His plan was to escape to a loyal colony world and rebuild his forces for a counterattack. He never made it. A human patrol vessel intercepted the transport. Soldiers boarded and searched every passenger until they found a tall figure with pale, blue skin trying to hide in a cargo container. Emperor Vorthok, ruler of 1,000 worlds, conqueror of 200 species, was dragged from his hiding place like a common criminal. He was brought before Admiral Morton in chains, his fine robes torn and dirty, his proud bearing broken. Morton looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "You ordered the deaths of 7 women who came to you in peace. You called them criminals. You threw their bodies away like garbage. You thought we would simply accept this and bow to your empire." She leaned forward, her eyes cold. "You were wrong. Vorthok was transported to Earth to face justice. The war was over. Humanity had won, but the price had been terrible. 60,000 human soldiers had died. 300 ships had been destroyed. Entire colonies had been devastated by Zoroth counterattacks. The 7 generals were finally coming home, or what remained of them. And with them came the enemy, who had ordered their deaths, to face judgment for his crimes. The trial of Emperor Vorthok was broadcast across the galaxy. Every species in known space watched as the once mighty ruler was brought before a human tribunal in Geneva, the same city where the 7 generals had gathered before their fatal mission. The symbolism was intentional. Vorthok stood in a simple chamber, stripped of his imperial robes and wearing gray prisoner clothes. His pale blue skin looked sickly under the harsh lights, and his dark eyes darted nervously around the room. He was surrounded by human guards, human judges, and human observers. For the first time in his long life, he was completely powerless. The chief prosecutor was a woman named Catherine Bell. She was 53 years old. With silver streaks in her dark hair and a voice that carried decades of courtroom experience, she had volunteered for this case the moment she heard about it. Driven by a personal connection that she revealed during her opening statement, "General Nicole Perry was my aunt," Bell said, her voice steady despite the emotion behind her words. "She taught me to play piano when I was 7. She held my hand at my mother's funeral, I was 15. She encouraged me to become a lawyer when everyone else said I should pursue science like the rest of my family." She turned to face Vorthok directly. No. She went to Kelvara Prime, believing she could help build a peaceful future for humanity. She was murdered while trying to help a wounded colleague. Her body was thrown away like garbage, and this creature gave the order. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Witnesses testified about the planning of the massacre. Intelligence officers presented evidence showing that Vorthok had personally approved the assassination. Communications experts demonstrated how the fabricated evidence had been created before the generals even arrived at Kelvara Prime. The most damning testimony came from Vorthok's own advisors, who had been captured during the war and agreed to cooperate in exchange for lighter sentences. They described meetings where Vorthok had laughed about the human response to the deaths, confident that the primitive species would simply accept their loss and submit. "The Emperor said it would be like stepping on insects," one advisor testified. "He said humans were too weak and divided to pose any real threat. He planned to use the incident as justification for conquering Earth within 5 years." When given the opportunity to speak in his own defense, Vorthok showed no remorse. His voice was arrogant, his manner dismissive, as if he still believed himself superior to everyone in the room. "I acted to protect my empire from a dangerous species," he declared. "Humans expand rapidly and breed faster than any civilization we have encountered. If we had not acted, they would have eventually threatened our existence. I did what any leader would do." Prosecutor Bell responded with a question that silenced the room. "Did the 7 generals threaten you? Did they carry weapons? Did they give any indication that they intended anything other than peaceful negotiation?" Vorthok hesitated for only a moment before answering. "They were human. That was threat enough." Bell nodded slowly, then turned to the judges. "No further questions." The prosecution rests. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty of murder. Guilty of conspiracy. Guilty of crimes against humanity. The judges deliberated for less than an hour before returning their decision. The question of punishment sparked intense debate across human space. Many demanded execution. They wanted Vorthok to suffer as the generals had suffered, to experience the same fear and pain before dying. Protests erupted outside the courthouse, with crowds chanting for the emperor's death. But President Morrison, now in his 2nd term, argued for a different approach. He addressed the nation the night before sentencing, explaining his reasoning. "Killing Vorthok would give him an escape," Morrison said. "He would become a martyr to those who still believe in his empire. His death would be quick, far quicker than the suffering he caused. That is not justice. That is mercy he does not deserve. Instead, humanity chose a punishment that would last far longer. Vorthok was sentenced to life imprisonment on a station orbiting Earth. He would live in a small cell with a single window, through which he could see the planet he had dismissed as insignificant. He would receive broadcasts showing the progress of his former empire, now being transformed into something completely different. For the Zorath people, tired of endless wars and imperial ambitions, had embraced the opportunity for change. With their fleet destroyed and their emperor captured, they had no choice but to accept human terms for peace. But those terms were not as harsh as many expected. Humanity demanded no territory, asked for no slaves or tribute. Instead, they insisted that the Zorath build a democracy with free elections and protected rights for all citizens. Human advisors helped establish new institutions. Human teachers shared knowledge of governance and law. Within a decade, the Zorath Confederation had become a valued ally rather than a conquered enemy. Vorthok watched it all from his cell. He watched his people embrace human culture, adopt human values, and eventually join the United Earth Coalition as equal partners. He watched former subjects celebrate holidays with their human friends, watched children who had never known imperial rule grow up free and happy. He lived for 40 years in that cell, watching everything he had built transform into something he would have destroyed without hesitation. When he finally died alone and forgotten, he had witnessed the complete erasure of his legacy. There could be no greater punishment for a creature who had valued power above all else. On the first anniversary of the massacre, humanity observed a moment of silence across all settled space. Ships stopped in their courses. Factories halted production. People everywhere paused to remember what had been lost and what had been achieved in the name of 7 brave women. A memorial was erected on Kelvara Prime, which had been renamed Right Station in honor of the admiral who had sent the message that united humanity. 7 statues stood in the central plaza, each depicting one of the fallen generals in their dress uniforms. They faced outward, as if still watching over the species they had served. The inscription beneath them was simple, but powerful. They came in peace. They died in betrayal. They are remembered in glory. Admiral Catherine Wright, General Maria Santos, General Patricia Lane, General Diana Cruz, General Nicole Perry, General Laura Bennett, General Susan Kelly, Humanity's Daughters, Cute. Vice Admiral Rachel Morton, who had led the fleet to final victory, visited the memorial every year until her death at 93. In her final interview, conducted just weeks before she passed, she reflected on what the war had meant for humanity and for the galaxy. "We did not want war," she said, her voice thin with age but still steady. "We had hoped for peace, for partnership, for a place among the stars as friends rather than conquerors. Zorath took that hope from us when they killed our generals." She paused, looking at a photograph of Admiral Grant that hung on her wall. But in destroying our innocence, they awakened something else. They showed us our own strength. They united us in a way that centuries of cooperation could never have achieved. And they taught the galaxy a lesson that will be remembered for 1,000 years. She smiled, though her eyes held sadness. "Do not harm those we love. Do not mistake our kindness for weakness. Do not underestimate what humanity will sacrifice to protect our own." The Zorath learned this lesson too late. Others will not make the same mistake. The memorial on Right Station became a pilgrimage site. Humans visited to pay respects to the women who had died for peace. Aliens came to understand the species that had transformed galactic politics. Children learned the names of the 7 generals before they learned the names of their own ancestors. And across the galaxy, species that had once dismissed humanity as insignificant began to treat them with respect. Not fear, though some certainly feared what humans could do when provoked, but respect for a species that valued honor, remembered sacrifice, and would move the stars themselves to protect those they loved. The 7 generals had died far from home, betrayed by those who had promised friendship. Yes. But their deaths had changed everything. They had united humanity. They had transformed an empire. It taught the galaxy that some species, when pushed too far, will rise to heights that no one thought possible. In the end, they had achieved what they set out to do. They had secured humanity's future among the stars. They had just paid a higher price than anyone could have imagined. Their names live on. Their sacrifices remembered. And humanity, forever changed by their loss, continues to reach for the stars they died trying to touch. This is not just their story. It is the story of every human who fought, who sacrificed, who refused to accept injustice. It is the story of a species that learned its own strength through tragedy. It is the story of justice, delayed, but never denied. It is the story of humanity. And it is far from over.